Today we're going to talk a little bit about the ways of the web. So oftentimes people, when they think about what is the web, they imagine this like magical thing out there, and they don't have a really good sense of what the web actually is. So these are two photos. The photo on the left is a whole bunch of computers. They're all really small and thin, and they're sort of on top of each other. And so they're a bunch of computers in a room somewhere. And the photo on the right is what that building looks like. And these are actually Google's computers. The photos on the left is what it looks like inside a Google data center. So when you use Google, what that actually means is you are visiting those pictures there. Oh, some of you are saying we can't see them. This should be on the big photos, the slides. Yeah, if the slideshow window is open, that's where you should see it. So the computers are on the left, and this is an example of one of what's called a data center. So it's where the computers actually live on the right. So when you go to Google, you're not actually going to like a magical thing out there. You are talking to these computers that are in an actual building somewhere. There's nothing magical about the web. The web is just a bunch of computers hooked up together, and some of the Google ones, are inside of this building that you can see right there. So how do you actually talk to these computers? Well, when you go to a website, you might see that you go to something like facebook.com/thedailykitten, which, by the way, is apparently a Facebook page where every day you get another kitten posted. So when you actually go to that, there's two things that are happening. First off, you're going to facebook.com, and that is which computers you're actually going to. So for example, google.com, the servers that we just saw on the last slide, those are in Michigan somewhere. But if you're going to facebook.com, you might be going somewhere in California. So the first little bit of the URL is kind of like an address. It's like a phone number of who you're going to talk to, whether that's Google or Facebook or Flickr or Twitter or anything like that. And then the second part of the URL is like you just made a phone call to somebody, and then you say, "Hello, is Bob there?" So imagine that facebook.com is like the phone number, and Daily Kitten is the person who you're asking to talk to once you actually make that phone call. So you're calling up facebook.com, you're typing its phone number, and then you're saying, "Hello, I would like to talk to the Daily Kitten." And that's what a URL is. It's a part of where you're going to be talking to, which computer you're going to, and then who you're asking to speak to when you get there. And some URLs, like the one we just saw, are really beautiful, and so you can kind of see what's happening, and some of them it's a lot harder. So here are two examples of URLs. So on the very first one, you can sort of read it. You're going to google.com/search Q equals penguins. And if you go to that, it takes you to a search results page for penguins. And you could actually replace the word penguins with the word puppies, and you would be able to see search results for puppies. And so you can, because it's sort of a URL that you can read, you're able to actually replace things right in the URL and make changes. So if you made it say Q equals kittens, you would do a search for kittens. The URL right underneath it, you can see it's the exact same as the first one, but it adds in this and LH equals FR. And that LH equals FR says, "Show me the page in French." So you can actually put things instead of that FR and change languages, just like how you could change that penguins to other things. So this is an example of two URLs that you can kind of read them in English. And so if you actually change them in your browser's URL bar, you can make different types of searches. Now, here are some other URLs that you might be more familiar with. They kind of look, some of them look like gobbledygook, and it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. Some of you are curious about this dot. This dot is actually my mouse. Yeah, I'm moving it around. So So like the very first one here, you can tell it goes something to mail.google.com, but it's a little bit hard to see what the heck's going on afterwards. Whereas something like this, facebook.com/Zuck, goes to Zuck's page on facebook.com. So some of them are really, really easy to kind of tell what's happening, and some of them are a little bit more difficult. And we're going to be making our own page, so our own one of them on HTMLpad, and we've chosen the name Story Camp to use because it's a URL that's sort of easy for people to remember. So that's why we've picked that one. But now, one of you asked a little bit earlier, okay, so how do you actually talk to this computer? How do you access the web? We saw the computers are living in a building somewhere, but now what? So here's something for you guys to picture. Imagine, let's ignore the computer for a sec. Imagine that there's a phone number you can call. And what happens is you call this phone number and they say, hello, you've dialed, call a recipe, name something. And you say pizza. And then when you call it, it starts replying with a recipe. So it starts to say things like, roll out some dough, put some tomato sauce on it, put some cheese on it, put some pepperoni on that. It just begins to tell you the recipe. Okay, so you've got this phone number, you call it, you say the word pizza to them, and it replies with a recipe. Now imagine that you hire somebody, you pay somebody, $6 to listen to that recipe and do whatever the recipe says. So you hand them the phone, you say, call the recipe phone number, say the word pizza, and whatever that tells you to do, do it. Well, that person's actually going to make you a pizza. So they're just talking on the phone to some phone number out there, and at the end of it, you end up with some pizza. Now, the really cool thing about this is, notice that the pizza itself did not go through the phone. There was at no point that a pizza went through the phone line and appeared out the other end of the phone, even though it's a phone conversation that made the pizza happen. Web pages are really, really similar to that. Web pages are like recipes. And so you are talking to a computer that tells you the recipe, and the computer puts it together the way that this person puts a pizza together, and you end up with a web page at the end. So instead of our pizza phoning call, imagine instead that you are talking to a computer. You visit the URL and you say kittens, and it replies with a recipe, and that recipe is HTML. And then your computer listens and does whatever the HTML tells it to do, and at the end, you end up with a web page. So just like how when we talked on the phone, we didn't end up with any pizza going through the phone, when you ask for a web page, you don't actually get, the computer doesn't actually put together the web page, it just puts together the instructions. And that's what we're going to be building today. We are going to be building one of those things like a recipe, a bunch of instructions that tell a computer how to put a web page together. All right. So what we're going to be doing is whenever somebody asks for any page, like /mypage, we're going to be using /storycamp to begin. We are providing the instructions for what it's going to do. And here's what that looks like. You're going to see a lot of this in just a second. So if you look right here, you'll see these things that say tag with these little angle brackets around it. And then something here, we've got put your text here, and then another tag, and this one has the slash. So this is what HTML looks like right here. Tags, this is how you open a tag, and this is how you close a tag. So here's our very first example. The tag's strong. We open it here and we close it here. And you notice how it has this slash. Anything that's in between these two strong tags is going to appear as bold. Here's another example right below it. Anything that appears between these EM tags is going to be, it stands for emphasis, is going to be in italics. So you can take a look again. So it opens up a tag like this with these little brackets, the name of the tag's inside of it. We close it with a slash, and anything between the opening and the closing is what it applies to. All right, So now let's all move to HTML pad for a second. I'm gonna take us through a couple of different things really quickly.